Ball College Football. I'm your host, Grayson Grunhafer, and today, let's talk about these two teams that played in the national championship. Georgia, of course, won 65-7. If you want my breakdown of that, go listen to the last episode of Crystal Ball College Football. But today, I kind of want to talk about the state of these two programs and just kind of give a quick overview of where things are at and where I think they might be heading. And of course, we'll start with the team that is the back-to-back national champs, and that's Georgia. They're looking for a three-peat. They're 29-1 over the last two seasons with two titles in a row. They continue to recruit at just this obscenely high level to the point where it's basically you're mentioning, Georgia, Alabama, maybe Ohio State. Those are kind of the three schools that when I think of recruiting at a high level, putting a good product on the field year in and year out, those are the three that I kind of think of. I think Clemson, is kind of in there as well. But those three seem to be standing out a little bit more. And Georgia, since they've gotten that recruiting at that level, they've really taken off a whole lot. And you see it. You see them dominate up front in the trenches on the offensive line and defensive lines very, very often. And I think the next step for Georgia really is, getting a quarterback that is maybe a high-end level talent. Now, I know I've talked about Stetson Bennett quite a bit on this channel, but he's a very, very good college quarterback. There's no doubt about it. Is he as good as C.J. Stroud? No. Is he as good as Bryce Young? No. But in college, he's very, very good. So the question is, can they find a quarterback that is also a really good NFL prospect who maybe opens up the offense even more, if that's even possible? But if they find someone like that, I do think there's another step in the right direction. But I'll also say that they're winning these championships without that kind of guy. And that's huge. And we've seen that from Nick Saban at Alabama. We saw him win championships with guys that weren't necessarily NFL guys. But we've also seen teams win championships with NFL guys like Clemson, Deshaun Watson, Trevor Lawrence, Joe Burrow at LSU. Like, when you have that quarterback that's a complete difference maker, it does take your offense to a whole nother level. And so that's kind of what I want to see from Georgia. Do they have that guy? I don't know. You got to see Carson Beck for a couple minutes in the national championship game. He'll probably be their starter next year, and he could be a good one. But I just am curious if that could be the next step for Georgia. And if they do find a guy like that, can Kirby Smart take advantage of it? We just saw Nick Saban unable to win a championship with Bryce Young. We saw Ryan Day unable to win a championship with C.J. Stroud. It doesn't always work out, but I do think if Georgia were to find one, it could make them even tougher to solve offensively. And we know what you're going to get in their run game. We know what you're going to get from the defensive game. And I think that puts their ceiling and their floor very, very high at this point. And then you just go look at their schedule and you go, okay, so you're trying to three-peat, right? That hasn't happened. Let's go figure out a way to do that, right? That hasn't happened in modern college football history. And so you look at their schedule next year. UT Martin, Ball State, South Carolina, UAB are their first four games. All at home. They're going to be 4-0 in a hurry to start the year next year. Then they go to Auburn. They got Kentucky at Vanderbilt. I don't expect those games to be very challenging. Auburn might be a challenge just because it's on the road. But again, those are very winnable games. So now you're 8-0 heading into your bye week. 8-0 already. Just kind of write it in. I feel like that's going to happen. It's rather obvious that it's going to happen. They get the bye week at a perfect time. Then they play Florida, who was okay this year, but they're still trying to build something. I think that's going to be a win. You get Missouri at home, and you get Ole Miss at home. You're beating Missouri. Ole Miss, it's at Georgia. They're not going to lose to Ole Miss at home. And then the big one, at Tennessee. That's going to be a tough one. I think everyone expects Tennessee to be very, very good next year. I know I do. Will they be as good as they were this year? That's tough because I think they were an elite football team this year. But that's the toughest game on their schedule. Then the final week of the year, you play at Georgia Tech. I don't see a lot of obstacles there. I really, really don't. And for me, it just comes down to this. If they're 12-0 and they are in the SEC championship game, it really doesn't matter what happens in the SEC championship game. Because if they're 12-1 on the year and they made it all the way there undefeated, it's going to be really hard for them to bounce from number 1 to number 5 in 1 week, losing to a team that's probably a top 4 team as well. I based on that, based on what I see from this team talent-wise, it's hard for me to imagine they don't get back to a national championship or at least a college football playoff next season. They're in a great spot. Kirby Smart doing a great job, and they're back-to-back national champs for a reason. On the flip side, TCU, awesome year. 13-2, incredible. They won a college football playoff game. They're the first Big 12 team to win a college football playoff game. That's special. Now they're the only Big 12 team to make the college football playoff once Oklahoma leaves. They're in a great position because they've done what the other teams that will be in the Big 12 haven't been able to do. So you have that to sell. Now when the 12-team playoff comes, that changes some things because it opens the door to many, many more teams. But I do think it's a great spot to be. You made it to a national championship. You can sell that on the recruiting trail, which they're doing, which I'll get into in a second. And it was the first year with Sonny Dykes, so you feel like there's a future that is very, very bright ahead for them. And I think Sonny Dykes has talked about that a little bit, that there's still work to do. There's still things they need to improve on. And I think for them, their biggest thing is recruiting because they do a great job in the transfer portal, and we're seeing it right now. They've been able to land guys from Alabama. They've been able to find guys who are highly rated guys that just didn't work at their previous stop. Now they're coming to TCU. Now it's up to TCU to get the most out of them. And I think we saw that from Sonny Dykes this year. He did a great job at developing the guys from the portal and making sure he found guys and evaluated guys that fit exactly what he, Joe Gillespie, and Garrett Riley were trying to do. And that's really, really impressive that he was able to do that. So I have a lot of confidence that he's going to continue to be able to do that, but you still have to be able to recruit. You have to be able to find guys in the recruiting class that can come in and contribute and develop over the years, and then you just supplement with transfers. That's the goal of any program in my eyes at this point, unless you're at Georgia or Alabama, where it's literally you're just recruiting your guys and then developing them and maybe taking a transfer or two that are very, very high-level guys at another school. But in this situation, it's a little bit different. You got to find the talent in the recruiting class, and then you blend it in with the transfers. And what TCU is doing in this class is very encouraging. They have one of, if not their best class ever. It's probably going to finish inside the top 15. It's going to be right around that. It'll be top 20 for sure. And because of that, they're really building something that could end up being special as long as you're evaluating the talent correctly and as long as they're able to sustain this even if they lose their assistant coaches. And that's going to be key because eventually Garrett Riley is going to move on and probably be a head coach somewhere. And I think Joe Gillespie might end up being a head coach somewhere as well, even after what happened in the national championship game. But I would say, TCU's in a great spot as the Big 12 is changing, as the college football landscape is changing right now. They're in a good spot, and the thing that they can really sell is coming back home. And there's a lot of great players that come out of that Dallas-Fort Worth area that want to come back home, and TCU's right there. And so they're going to capitalize on that. So as long as they hit on the recruiting trail, I think they're going to be a very formidable team in the Big 12 for years to come. And they're probably one of the teams that I'm circling as one of the teams that could carry the Big 12 into this next era. And I think there's a few other teams like that, but TCU is definitely on that list going forward. So, again, that's pretty much it. That's the national championship. We've talked about both teams, where they could be heading. We talked about the game significantly. But, again, congratulations to Georgia fans, national champions 2 years in a row. Enjoy that. TCU fans, enjoy the run. That was a heck of a season that they put out there, made it to a national championship. And we're truly a very, very fun story to watch as this Cinderella in college football. So that's it. Thanks for listening today to Crystal Ball College Football. Later in the week, we'll talk about one more recruiting thing, and then we'll get into our off season, where we're going to have to talk about a ton of different things as I lead you in to the 2023 season. But thanks for listening today. This has been Crystal Ball College Football.